Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Taha Elraaid. He's the CEO at Lamah. Taha, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Gavin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Lamah is actually really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
All right, great. So basically, I grew up in Libya,
Very cool.
and on the coastline, and I spent pretty much all of my young adult life in Libya up to the age of 17. Afterward, I moved to Australia to finish my education. Halfway, not really halfway, but I think a year into the studies, I decided to switch majors. I was going to finish computer science, but then I was like, you know what? I had a change of hearts. I went to graphic design, and then again that happened to me, and I moved from Australia to the US, and I applied for filmmaking school. So I emailed a bunch of film schools in the US, and the first one that responded back was in San Francisco Film School. And I moved there. I spent a year or 2 years with them. And then obviously being in San Francisco, you just get inspired by all the tech companies and the startup scene over there. And it just got really interesting for me. And so I started to hang out with different entrepreneurs and different people that have experience with building technology companies and building other stuff. I was fascinated with technologies from early age, but I've never seen it as a business until I actually moved to San Francisco. I spent 5 years there. I met with tons of people who are very inspiring, and I feel like that's the best education I've ever gotten, is to be able to hang out with top level entrepreneurs and founders. Um, uh, for that being. And then I moved back to Libya and I started a tech company, hoping to change something here and add a bit of quality to the life of everyone that lives here.
Interesting. Okay. So walk us through what made you move back to Libya and actually come up with the idea and found Lamah.
So ever since I was a young kid, my family has been very fortunate, and they've been very successful in food industries.
Okay.
And I was attending meetings with my dad all the time. When I was 12, instead of hanging out on the streets and playing, sports or doing other activities, I was just with my dad.
That's cool.
Meeting different people from across the world. We used to deal with a lot of people from Europe. So you kind of into that business scene from early on. So I grew up with the understanding of how to build a company, how to make it successful. So the family business has grown significantly over the last, 20 years, and we're currently now the largest private sector employer in the country.
Very cool. Congrats
But
on that. That's huge.
yeah, so we have about, I think it's almost 2,000 people working for the
Wow.
companies that we have. But when I moved back in 2017, I kind of wanted to start to do something different. Obviously, because the fact that I was in San Francisco, being like the tech hub, I guess, of the US or the universe. Um, I came back to Libya and I found that most people understanding of technology is revolved around um, you know um, just using Microsoft World and using the internet just for fun, not really for a lot of beneficial stuff. And I looked at the developer scene and I found that most developers just build basic systems like point of sale systems and inventory management systems. So there was not a lot of tech innovative products on the market that actually help save people time and improve their quality. So one of the first things that I've seen when I came back in 2017 is that the huge lines outside of the banks, people trying to cash out their salaries. Usually, one of the biggest issues they hear, or the biggest things they hear all the time, is the fact that the system is down. So
Interesting.
imagine spending hours outside waiting for the bank to open, and then once the bank opens, they're like, "Oh shoot, the business actually just the whole system is down," and thus you have to actually come back the next day. And there's no guarantee that the system will be actually functioning the next day.
Wow.
And then when I was trying to get a passport issued, I went like 4 times to the office, passport office, and I was trying to get a passport, but somehow along when I was waiting there, the system keeps going down for a very odd reason.
Okay.
Now I understand why it goes down, because the system infrastructure was not built from scratch to handle that many uh, uh, requests and to handle that many volume of people asking for new passports. So eventually, after 4 days of waiting, I was able to get an appointment, and then I went there, and I was standing in a huge line waiting for my turn so that they can take the photos and the biometrics. And really, that really sparked the idea. Was like, why not do something innovative in a country that doesn't? It's not really known for its tech solutions, and to really put that system down mentality behind us, because the perception of IT in Libya, it's really messed up. Usually your parents or your family will tell you like, hey, go study engineering, electric engineering, mechanical engineering, or become a doctor or a professor or some sort of other industries, but no one actually tells you to go and study computer science, because computer science here is pretty much useless. The graduates from universities, we have believe it or not, we have an IT university or college in Libya, multiple ones, but the output that they produce, it's not really useful. Uh,
Wow.
you know, and the issue is that the market doesn't actually require developers, because all of the old systems that were embedded in the country, they were developed by foreign companies. So even
Oh,
the passport system is done by a foreign company. Even the core banking system is all developed by foreign companies. So there was no need for developers to actually work on themselves, because there's no demand in the market.
wow.
So you'll see them graduating from IT college, and then they will go find a job somewhere else. Like they might be working on a software, not software. I mean, they're working on IT. I don't know what, computer shops,
Yeah.
installing Windows and
Oh,
Microsoft
interesting.
suites and fixing computers, but that's about it. Or if they're into programming, they might build an inventory system or a point of sale system that is, a product that they can sell and make money off. But if they're into academics, then they go back into the college and teach what they already know that's not really useful. But there wasn't really much of a market for them.
Wow.
So even the perception of having a website, even for big corporations here, they don't really take it seriously.
Wow.
And most companies still
Fascinating.
use like old-fashioned emails. Like you'll have a big company that is like their capital is like in 100 million dinars, which is like $50 million or something,
Wow.
and they still use Gmail accounts and Yahoo accounts,
Wild.
without having a proper website. But so our really focus was to try to build something where change the perception of IT, because it got a really bad rep. Because every time you want to get something done, they tell you the system is down, and usually the IT guys are the ones to blame. So we
Sure.
wanted to even the play field and actually make sure that developers that work in the country and people actually can produce new products that are innovative and hopefully change the perception of society on the importance of IT, and see it as something that can actually help them improve their lifestyle rather than something that is useless.
No, that's fascinating. Okay. So walk us through some of the other stuff you guys are working on at Llama, because you guys are really building some innovative stuff.
Yeah. So when we were kind of putting our goals and the ideas that we wanted to build, one of the things that we wanted to start with is the fact that we want to build a solid foundation. And in order for you to build that ecosystem, you still need some fundamental things, and in which one of them is a postal addressing system. So believe it or not, it's 2017, and Libya doesn't actually have street names, and they don't have postal addresses. So people are reliant on having a distinctive address. Where, like, if I tell you, "Hey, Kevin, where do you live?" Imagine telling me, like, "Hey, you know that gas station next to that church? Make a right turn, and then you find Walmart. I live right behind
Wow.
it." So
Wow.
that's how it is, and it's still like up to now, people are still utilizing that kind of way of telling people where they live. So we decided to do something about it. And 2017, we started to put the team together and start to think about some different ideas on how we can build a postal system where we don't actually have street names, and we don't even have city boundaries. One of the biggest issues is that when we went to the government departments and agencies, we're like, "Hey guys, how many cities do we actually have in the country?" So to my surprise, at that time, the this the city count in the country was around 99 cities.
Okay.
Um, Now it's 123 and
Wow.
growing. Um, so it's not really known because the political scene and instability has made it difficult for them to actually have a proper um, system where they like classify this as a city or a town or a village. Like every two people want to start a city somehow. So we're like, okay, cool. And then, do you guys actually have city boundaries? Like, do we know where this city ends and where this city starts? They're like, not really. So we kind of got to a dead end with the government in terms of like how we can build a system utilizing city boundaries. So we thought of a different approach, and in which what we did is we took the whole map of Libya and we
Okay.
divided it into different squares, and the square size is 1.3 kilometers by 1.3 kilometers, so it's a mile by a mile almost, a
Okay.
square mile, and every square mile is roughly, not roughly. I mean, it can hold up to almost 100,000 addresses. So we can create up to 100,000 addresses, digital addresses, on the map without having to replicate anything. And every square would have their own distinctive code that represents that thing, which is what we have as a zip code or a postal code. And that way, we were able to identify location based on where it actually exists on the map, and regardless of the city. So the address, the way it's structured, it starts with a building number, and then because we don't have street names, we came up with a different way. Instead of street names, we actually had a building type. So when you send a parcel from one country to the other or from
Yeah.
anywhere, you need to tell them if it's going to a residential or going to a commercial address,
Totally.
because
Yeah.
they have a different sorting system. So what we did is we embedded that into the address. So now
Interesting.
when you read the address, you would know exactly where it's heading. If it's heading, like, you'll read the address, you're like, okay, this is an actual residential address, because instead of you have the building number, and then you have like letter A, for example, that represents the houses, and the letter J represents companies, and we have the different categories. We have about 24 categories for the different buildings that we have. Fast forward, a couple of almost 2 years of work. We currently now have almost 1.2, actually more than 1.2 million addresses created into
Wow.
the system, covering more than 65 different cities across the country that we know of. And we know we have about 50,000 active users every month, and growing. The application allows the users to get addresses, and at the same time, it actually provides them with a navigation app as well. So you don't really need to use any other applications.
So, okay, so let's expand on that. So you're basically, so if I want to go to my friend's house across town and I've never been to their place, I can use your app to basically guide me there and I don't need any landmarks. That's basically what you're saying, correct?
Exactly, yeah. Like, they can just send you a link, and once you have that link, you click on it, and it will just start to get directions, and you would use it as if you're using like any other navigation app, like Google Maps or Maps Me. So you don't need to use that. So if you go into Libya, you'd probably download Makani, and that is what you want to have. so you can get to your place or friends, or because part of the application, like part of what the application offers as well, it offers you a full guide, commercial guide. So like if you're looking
Okay.
for restaurants, a cafe, or a hotel, you can actually find it there too. So think of it as Yelp merged with Google Maps, TripAdvisor, all in one application. But it's made for
Wow.
local market. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. So I'm trying to just like figure out where to go next, because I think the fascinating thing to me about this then is, well, I can start receiving packages. Like, how was I getting mail before you implemented this system?
So before that, you used to, I mean, we don't have that concept. Like, there's no e-commerce platforms in Libya. So government don't send you any parcels, or they're not going to send any documents to your house because they actually have the system for it. But if you would want to get or receive something, you'd go to the post office and you open a post box,
Okay.
and you'll get a post code, or a box that you can share with your BO box. Share it with whomever wants to send you a package, and then if the package arrives there, you have to go and pick it up yourself. So there's
Got it.
no door-to-door
Interesting.
delivery.
Okay, but now with what you've just outlined, I
Yeah,
could send a package to your house, correct?
exactly. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Interesting. Okay. So then walk me through, how does somebody actually onboard and get this address with you guys?
So what we did is we did two things. First thing is we actually hired a bunch of people, data entry team, in 11 different cities, 11 major different cities across the country, in order for us to gather as much data as possible. So what we did
Sure.
is we hired these guys, and we every team member will have a postal code that they go and pretty much door to door, trying to they will input data utilizing satellite image. So they would drop a
Okay.
pin on a building, and then they go on a field trip and make sure that building, because on the top, it might look like a house, but then if you go there, you might discover it's actually a commercial building.
Right.
So what they do is they drop the pen down on a satellite image, and then after the first initial data entry process is done, they go on a field trip, and then from there they enter. If it's a residential, we don't take any private information. We just mark it as a residential building. If it's a commercial building or a public place, we go in and we ask them for contact details and the correct names and so on, so that we can have it on the application as well. And then the second part is what we enable people, and that really fueled our expansion into different parts of the country, where the user can actually go online on the application and create an address and get an address within like less than 10 seconds,
Wow.
um, by themselves. So they didn't actually need us to be in that city for them to actually get an address. So they can just get it online, utilizing the app, and it's a free uh, address. They don't actually need to pay anything for us.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you guys were physically going door to door, because I'm sure, like anybody in North America, I think a lot of us have seen, the Google Maps driving around,
Yeah,
and the Apple Car Maps driving
yeah.
around. Um, it Interesting. Okay. So I'm curious then, how did you guys fund this, and how do you make money off the app?
Yeah. So the first thing is we actually went to almost a million like building across the country,
Sure. Wow.
and the funding was all bootstrap. I utilized my family's previous success, and we built on that, and we bootstrapped it, and
Wow.
it's been very good, and still continues to do so. We're just at this stage where we're trying to maybe go out and target VCs and so on, so that we can get their expertise rather than just the money. Um,
Right.
but one of the things that we did is we're still pre-revenue, and the reason behind it is that we're not really we're what we did is we're trying to build this infrastructure in the country, so that imagine this scenario: you have a piece of land, you create the entire road network. Now you own that road network. then you can start to add services on top of that. So part of our revenue streams that are coming along, we are developing our APIs so that developers can actually utilize the addressing system into their applications,
Right.
and for logistic companies to actually start to utilize the app as well. Um, Other than that, we have a dashboard that is specifically for the government side, in which they're actually able to get statistics about where people live, what type of businesses are there, so they can help them with planning the city and
Wow.
adding more infrastructure. Because believe it or not, the government actually doesn't even know where people live and how many people live there, because we didn't
Wow.
have a census for a long, long time. So we actually have the most accurate, up to date information in terms of where people live and where the houses are, and even looking back at the different eras, at least for the last 10 years, the development has been significant, and we can see the people shifting their location from one side to the other, and we know where people are located because we actually went on these field trips, and it's very recent, like you're talking about last year's uh, uh, data, which the government doesn't actually have.
Wow. This is totally fascinating to me. So I'm curious then, like, this is probably obvious, but like somebody like Amazon would want to move probably prime into Libya because you have all these addresses now, you have a whole system around this, and they're obviously looking to expand, right? And other online
Yeah,
retailers. Like, could
yeah,
that actually happen? Like, it sounds like you basically set up and they could,
a
launch.
logistic thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely one of the added benefits of having an address. We did a beta proof of concept kind of thing with a local bank.
Okay.
So Libya, because people don't trust the banks, so they
Okay.
usually want to have cash rather than just cards. So you'll have people lining up on the street trying to get their cash. So what we did is when COVID started in 2020 in Libya, early on, what we did is we went to one of the local banks and we offered this really crazy idea. And we told them like, hey, what if instead of having people line up on front of the bank, we actually deliver their salaries straight to their houses.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, so what we did is we did about 400 different people. So we built this online application, and that allowed the users or the people, the customers of that bank, to go in and then input their banking details. Because there's no online banking here. We're talking about very basic information like account number and name and ID number. And then we what we did is um, we allowed the user to pinpoint their address on the map so that we know exactly where they live, and then attach a photo of the check that they wanted to withdraw. So they do that, and then within less than 10 hours, they'll have it delivered right to their house. Um,
Interesting. It's like Uber for banking.
Exactly. Yeah, you just delivery service for money. Uh, just to prove a concept, like if you have that kind of, I mean, obviously we don't want to deliver money all the time, but
Sure.
it was just a thing to prove, like, hey, if you have an address, you can just do so much more than having people line up on front of the bank and then create that really unhealthy environment, especially with COVID when it was starting. It was just a crazy thing happening
Totally.
here. So we did that, and then we did another trial with a cosmetic company here in
Okay.
Libya, and we were delivering about almost 800 to 900 packages a month for them,
Wow.
utilizing the address. So we've seen a lot of growth the last few months and last year in terms of e-commerce movement here in Libya. I don't think the big guys are going to come to Libya because the market is very, very small and is not very attractive. But it opens up the opportunity for local entrepreneurs to create stores and now actually have a logistic uh, way of
Sure.
like getting to people.
So
And
yeah,
yeah,
interesting.
so we
So
have a an international. It's the largest logistic company in the MENA region. It's called RMX. RMX is one of the, like, it's like FedEx,
okay.
but of the Middle East. And so they're operating in Libya, and there are we're in talks now to start beta testing deliveries to the door-to-door deliveries, utilizing our addresses.
Interesting. So you're basically building your whole ecosystem inside Libya and then allowing locals to almost create their own Best Buys and Amazons and any other e-commerce, and then be local, ship local.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool and innovative.
Yeah, so think of it as like early stage. I think the stuff that we take for granted while living in the US and Canada, having an address, it's very basic. It's like everyone have an address
Sure.
over there, and it's just like you don't even think how valuable that address is
Totally.
until you go and like live somewhere else, like you don't have your address, and you see how much the struggle is. So I think the stuff that we took for granted while living abroad made it like value an address so much more now, and trying to mimic that same experience where people actually have better access to different services, and we still continuously grow. Like we have in the pipeline, also one of the other projects that we're working on is another product where it allows users to have access to services like Uber or taxi services and food delivery
Right.
services.
Sure.
uh, so we're tapping into that market as well, because we own the infrastructure now. So now the most logical part is to move into service provider.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fascinating. Well, and then even like, and we don't need to get political, but even just
yeah,
to allow people to like vote or
yeah,
let them just identify like, yeah, wow, that's interesting. That's actually
yeah.
really innovative.
So I think it just changing people's lives slowly through technology. Hopefully, we there's other problems that you guys might take. I mean, obviously, being in Western country, taking it for granted is actually to have emergency services. So can
Yeah.
you imagine having your house on fire and then having to describe where you live during
Yeah,
that?
that'd be wild.
So I think even the basics we're trying to cover. We did a beta test with one of the police departments here as well, in terms of like having people request emergency services through the application. And then we did the test where we had one officer and one car go to an address using the old method in which the victim was trying to describe where they live, and then the other way was to utilize the navigation app that we have, and it was a very significant result. We took down the arrival time by 8 minutes.
Wow.
uh, and that's it. I've in case of fire or in case of medical
Right.
emergencies or any type of emergency, basically every minute counts.
Totally.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
So
So
yeah.
why do you think that Libya never set up this system themselves?
So anything that, if it's not embedded from the get go in the government, because the political unrest that was happening in Libya, it really made it difficult for governments to focus on everything at the same time.
Right.
So at post revolution 2011, that's when like Arab Spring happened. Most countries were in a chaotic thing, and Libya was not any better than any of the countries next to us. Actually, the countries next to us had some sort of infrastructure.
Okay.
Libya, from I guess the last 50 years, it didn't really have a good infrastructure that, in case of a chaotic experience, which we experienced in 2011, it could actually start to, bring back some of that infrastructure back. But Libya didn't actually have that because it was all um, politically under one control, and having just one dictatorship kind of mentality in which like they had the ultimate control. Even the postal addressing system they were trying to create, pure pure to the 2011 revolution, it
Yeah.
was done purely for safeguarding the government. It was more to do with safety and security of the government versus it being a useful thing for people. They
Interesting.
made it sound like it's an addressing system, like you can actually get stuff delivered, but it was never the intention. It was just to make sure that they know where people are living and make sure that they are able to monitor growth and
Ah,
people movement. So that was the initial stage. And I guess like after the 2011, the project was kind of moving from one company to the other, and was moving from one department of the government to the other. So it just, and plus corruption obviously plays a huge role.
sure.
You talk about tens of millions of dollars that have been spent on the project, and when you look at the actual results, it's non-existent.
Totally fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, what made you decide that you needed to be the one and the company to tackle this huge problem? Because it's got to be pretty daunting, especially before you started.
Yeah, I think um, the love of having crazy adventures, and the thing is, the benefit of like living abroad, it just opens your eyes on what's possible. And I think realizing that, as I mentioned earlier, taking stuff for granted
Sure.
uh, for so many years that I lived abroad, it makes it like for me, I'm like, why can't we actually have this stuff? Like, how hard is it? So it was just, the love of actually trying to do something different and actually trying to impact. Like when you go to like San Francisco,
Yeah.
unless you're creating a life-saving, changing solution, you're not going to
Yeah.
stand out.
Yeah.
And so it's like all of the basic stuff is already covered, and the innovation is really slowly dying off. We're getting used to the same technologies popping up from time to time. It's not really new innovative stuff. But when you
Yeah.
go to Libya or MENA region in general, there's a lot of potential. It's just out there. People are the same everywhere. They won't have to. All of people have the same needs, same requirements, same things that they want to get access to. And when you go to Libya, for example, you don't have these services available for you. So if you don't do it, eventually someone else will do it. But if you can do it, why not try and actually just go in and try to, be the first one to actually do this kind of stuff. So I think being first and being able to have the largest impact is really what drives us. And the fact that we are going to see the advantages and the potential that this could create to the country, and shift the focus of the world rather than being one of the worst countries in the world into one of the, maybe hopefully we can start to export uh, our technology to the rest of the world, because we definitely have some great minds, and hopefully change the perception of Libya. Because if I talk to any Western and they're like, "Hey, what's Libya?" They probably don't even know what it is. But then if you mention Gaddafi, they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I remember that guy," and that's pretty much it. That conversation just dies right there. But people don't realize there's a lot of smart doctors, engineers, and other professors and scientists from Libya working, in the US and working in Europe, and they have great uh, set of skills. It just the opportunity has not been right for the Libyan people to show what they're capable of. I think what we're trying to do is just shine a light, the positivity, and spread, hopefully, some of that foreigner influence in a positive way in the country.
No, I think that's really incredible, man. I think that's really great. So I'm curious then, you have to have some advice, and you've probably been through many highs and many lows trying to implement something like this. What advice do you give to other people, or how did you get through some of those lows? Because when you're trying to build and change and implement something at such a big scale like this, you got to run into issues and roadblocks probably constantly. Maybe not so much anymore because it's up and running, but in the earlier days.
Well, one of the main things that we actually did something else. I think one of the other projects that we forgot to mention is that we built our headquarters in the city that we live in now, and we built alongside that is the largest co-working space in Libya.
Very
Um,
cool.
uh, and our initial thought was like one of the worst things you can have as an entrepreneur is not having a great network of people,
100%.
because having all the money in the world could not really get you everything. But having the largest network can get you a lot of stuff, and it opens up so many opportunities for you. And I struggled with that myself. But when I came back to Libya in 2017, I was pretty much a foreigner in my own country because I didn't know where to go and who to talk to. Um, and eventually that improved as I got to know more people. But uh, it just one of the best advice that I can tell people is to actually go out and network. Create your network early on, because that's what you're gonna be utilizing once you start your business. If you have a really good network of people that you can call, text, or email, or just hang out with, it just saves you a lot of downtime. And for me, it was the fact that when you're trying to create a product that tries to change people's life and improve upon that, the goal is always going to be fixed. But how to get there, you have to be able to adapt yourself to the surroundings, and make sure that you only focus on the goals, but don't focus on how to get there. Obviously be ethical, but really just have a goal and you just want to go for it, and that's it. It doesn't matter how you get there. There's a million way of getting getting to your goal. It just like making sure that you are able to adapt quickly to changing surroundings and changing political scene and changing like even financial arrangements, and making sure that you actually have a solid foundation that you go in, and just do it with your heart. I think that's the main thing, is to make sure that you build your network and to make sure that you actually learn to adapt. Starting a business definitely is not an easy thing. Don't start it for the money, because there's a lot of high paying jobs available. But if you really have a goal and you want to do it, just go for it and make sure that you are ready to adapt and change every once in a while, because the world keeps changing as you are growing.
No, I think that's actually really good advice. But like, how did you get through the day? Because you must have got people think like, this is impossible, this will never happen, you're crazy. You've heard probably all those things. Like, how
Yeah.
did you know that no, I'm on the right path? This is gonna work out, or I'm gonna make this work. Because I think that can be so easy to quit during, that kind of part of the journey.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of people do that, especially when we sold our project to the whole world. We worked for like 2 years without people knowing that we actually existed.
Okay.
Um, a part of that, because we don't want to have people say, "Hey, well, there's Google Maps. Why are you actually building this?" There's
Sure.
Maps.me. There's other apps that do this. Like, why are you trying to do something that everyone is already exists? And I'm like, that's true that they do part of what we are trying to do, but at the same time, it doesn't serve what we need as locals. Google Maps or any other application that exists on the market, it's an international corporation. No matter how great and how big they are, they're always going to have downfalls, especially with countries that actually don't have infrastructure. There's no point for Google Maps to actually care more about Libya. They'd rather spend the resources elsewhere, or the MENA region or Africa in general. But for us, as I mentioned, the main thing that when we face these criticisms and these comments, negative comments, our thought is like, are we doing something that is going to actually change people's lives? And if the answer is yes, we just ignored everyone. And we had a really solid network of people that were really like, we know them, that they can actually give us good advice and make sure that we're going into the right direction, and just have a really solid support system. My family is supporting me. Having us, that support system definitely made sure that I never quit, or not really think of it. At sometimes, obviously, because you keep growing and the numbers don't add up, and you're like, oh my god, like, is this gonna fail? But then I remember what we're trying to achieve, which is, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a goal, just screw what everyone else thinks, and just go for it. Because eventually, people always gonna have that perception of like, well, this is gonna fail. This is not gonna do anything. This is not gonna be useful. It's been said about all the great products that we have right now.
Totally.
So I'm like, if these great companies that exist now believe those really back-headed human beings, and stopped what they were doing, we would never have even Google or
Yeah.
have Facebook or have Amazon, or every company has the bad side, but at the same time, those companies have great, incredible benefits to everyone in the world, and no one can ignore that. And the fact that if they believed or they took other people's when they were first starting their companies as serious as they could have, they would have never succeeded. No one thought Tesla was possible. No one thought like Apple was possible. Um, you know, Amazon was a crazy project, and now it's the largest company in the world. These all stuff that if I think about it, I'm like, if these guys could do it, it just shows that they went and believed that in the vision that they want to create it, and that's it. They didn't really care much about what people think and so on. So if you have a clear goal, just as I mentioned, screw what everyone else thinks and just go for it.
No, I think that's really good advice. I also think that's really good advice, obviously, for people inside North America, but outside as well, right? That you can make a big impact in your local area and you don't have to be, in San Francisco or any of the other
Yeah,
hotspots in North America. You can do it wherever
anywhere.
you are geographically.
And
And
we
I
have some
think,
great examples. I mean,
sure.
just in the MENA region, there was a company called Open Souk,
Okay.
which is basically translates to open market, and it's pretty much like the equivalent of Craigslist
Oh, cool.
here. It's a multi-million-dollar company, and it's very successful. It's started actually in Libya, surprisingly, but it
Very
was
cool.
an engineer. He actually studied in California, and he came back to Libya, and then he started this like Craigslist lookalike web application, and it's been very, very successful. They have millions of people coming in every single day to utilize the app. We have another example of success, which is Souk.com, which is translates also to market.com. It was bought by Amazon not too
Wow.
long ago. We also have Kareem. Kareem is the competitor of Uber in the
Okay.
Middle East, and Uber just bought it for $3 billion. I think it was done last year.
Wow.
And there's a lot of these things. So just if you, no matter where you live, there's an opportunity to create an impact. Yes, being in a country like that has infrastructure helps, but also being deprived from these infrastructure, it makes you think hard, like in more creative way to solve your solutions, solve your problems. So if you're in the worst, there's no app for me. Libya is very virgin. It's just an empty marketplace. You can just do anything here. And I believe it's the same thing elsewhere in the world where they don't actually have a lot of infrastructure as well. Libya is not unique in that aspect. But as you mentioned, you don't need to be in North America, you don't need to be in Europe to become innovative and create successful stories, because success is always depending on what you uh, paint it to be. It's not really, there's no rules and regulations when it comes to success. Obviously becoming successful in North America means that you become, successful in creating a market validation. But at the same time, if you really want to create an impact, it doesn't matter where you live, and it doesn't matter what infrastructure you have. There's like if you go on Google and you just type in startups and innovative ideas in Africa, you'll see people have nothing, and yet they created a successful business that solves their issues, and that could be an
Totally.
impact in the world.
No, very cool, man. But sadly, we're coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, we have also a website, llama.com. You can reach me if you're personally on LinkedIn or any other major social media network. Utilizing my name. I think you'll have the links on your website as well.
Yeah, I will.
So
Yeah.
I'm actually, yeah, that makes it easier. But yeah, just I think that's pretty much it. We're trying to grow and create the outside knowledge of Libya. So this is obviously one of the great experiences that we get to share what's going on here with the rest of the world.
Perfect, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.